You already know what you need to do. You know you should wake up earlier. You know you should stop scrolling. You know you should start that project, have that conversation, make that change. You know. And yet, you don't do it. Why? Because there are two minds living inside your skull. One sees the vision, the other sabotages the mission. And until you understand which one is running your life, you will keep knowing everything and doing nothing. This book is not about learning more. It's about finally doing what you already know. The war ends today. Let's begin with a truth that will sting. You don't need another book. You don't need another podcast, another course, another mentor whispering wisdom into your ears. You don't need more information. You don't need better strategies. You don't need a new system or a morning routine or a productivity app that finally makes everything click. You need to stop lying to yourself. Because the real issue is not that you don't know what to do. The real issue is that two parts of you are at war and you keep pretending they're not. There is a version of you that understands everything. This version wakes up at 3 a.m. with absolute clarity. It knows exactly what needs to change. It writes lists, makes promises, sees the future with perfect precision. This version of you is brilliant. This version is certain. This version could build empires and transform your entire life. And then morning comes. The alarm rings, and a completely different version shows up. This version doesn't want to get out of bed. This version reaches for the phone instead of the purpose. This version says tomorrow, says later, says just one more day of rest before the real work begins. This version wants comfort. This version wants ease. This version doesn't care about your dreams because your dreams require effort, and effort feels like pain. And here you are, stuck between knowing and doing, watching your life unfold without your consent, watching days become weeks, become months, become years, all while knowing exactly what you should be doing differently. This is not laziness. Let me say that again because you've been calling yourself lazy for years and it hasn't fixed anything. This is not laziness. Lazy people don't care. Lazy people don't lose sleep over their unfulfilled potential. Lazy people don't feel that gnawing sense of regret every time they choose comfort over growth. You are not lazy. You are divided. You are at war with yourself. And that war is far more dangerous than laziness could ever be. This is a civil war between two minds that live inside one body. One mind operates on logic. It reads, learns, absorbs, strategizes. It sees consequences months and years down the line. It understands cause and effect with perfect clarity. It knows that discipline creates freedom. It knows that sacrifice creates success. It knows that the pain of action is always less than the pain of regret. The other mind operates on feeling. It lives only in this moment. It doesn't care about your 10-year plan. It doesn't care about your vision board. It wants comfort now, relief now, pleasure now. And here's the terrifying part. This mind is ancient. It has been running human behavior for hundreds of thousands of years. Your logical mind is a recent upgrade, a thin layer of civilization painted over millions of years of survival instinct. Your emotional mind is the original operating system. And when they go head to head, emotion almost always wins. Think about that. Your logical brain is essentially a software update. Your emotional brain is the original hardware. It has been keeping humans alive since before we could speak, since before we could write, since before we could build anything resembling civilization. It doesn't understand goals. It doesn't understand ambition. It understands survival. And survival means avoiding pain and seeking pleasure in this exact moment. This is why you can sit through an entire seminar about financial freedom and then buy something you don't need on the way home. This is why you can watch a documentary about health and order pizza before the credits finish rolling. This is why you can read a book about waking up early and then hit snooze 6 times the next morning. This is why you can look at your goals in the morning and abandon them by noon. You don't have a knowledge problem. You have a conflict problem. And until you understand this conflict, you will spend your entire life preparing to live instead of actually living. Most people believe they fail because they don't know enough, so they consume more information. They read more articles. They watch more videos. They save more content to review later. They collect knowledge like it's currency, as if understanding something is the same as doing something. It is not. Understanding and doing are completely different currencies. You cannot spend one in the other's economy. Knowing how to get in shape does not give you abs. Knowing how to save money does not fill your bank account. The person who knows exactly how to get in shape but remains out of shape is not suffering from an information gap. They are suffering from an internal split. Part of them wants the result. Part of them resists the process. And every single day, the part that resists gets to vote. The tragedy is not that you don't know what to do. The tragedy is that you know exactly what to do, and you watch yourself choose otherwise. Over and over and over again, until knowing becomes its own form of torture, until clarity becomes its own kind of prison. Here's what no one tells you. The more you know without acting, the worse the conflict becomes. Every piece of unexecuted knowledge becomes a weight. Every insight you don't apply becomes evidence against yourself. You start to feel like a fraud, like someone who talks about change but never changes, like someone who understands life but doesn't live it. And that feeling, that shame, that gap between who you know you could be and who you keep choosing to be, that is the real crisis, not ignorance. Awareness without action, that is the silent killer of potential. So let's stop pretending this is about learning more. Let's stop adding books to the pile. Let's stop collecting wisdom you'll never use. This is about confronting the two minds within you and finally deciding which one gets to lead, because they cannot both drive. One must rule and one must follow. And right now, you are letting the wrong one sit in the driver's seat, while your best self watches from the back, screaming directions that no one follows. The conflict is real. The war is real. And if you don't choose a side will be chosen for you. That's the brutal truth. Neutrality is not an option. Every moment you don't consciously decide which mind leads, the default wins. And the default is always the emotional mind. By default, the mind that wants comfort, ease, and immediate gratification takes control. Not because it's smarter, but because it's louder. Not because it's right, but because it's relentless. You don't have a knowledge problem. You never did. What you have is a conflict problem, a battle between two versions of yourself that has gone unmanaged for far too long, a war that you didn't even know you were fighting, a war that has been costing you years of your life, years of your potential, years of the person you could have become. This book will teach you how to finally end that war, not by destroying one mind. You cannot destroy your emotional self, and you shouldn't want to, but by learning which mind to follow and which one to silence. By learning when to listen and when to override. By learning how to make your logical mind the general and your emotional mind the soldier. Because until you do, you will spend another year knowing exactly what to do and doing nothing about it. Another year of starting Mondays with motivation and ending Fridays with regret. Another year of promising yourself that next time will be different, while deep down knowing it won't be. The war inside you has been raging your entire adult life. It has been there every morning when you hit snooze. It has been there every evening when you chose distraction over discipline. It has been there every time you knew the right thing to do and watched yourself do the opposite. Today, we name it. Today, we face it. And by the end of this book, you will finally know how to win it. Chapter 2. The Ancient Mind. Now that you understand the war, let's meet the enemy. Not your enemy in the sense that you must hate it, but the enemy in the sense that it has been defeating you for years without you even knowing its name. This enemy lives inside your skull. It wears your face. It speaks in your voice, and it has been running your life in the shadows since the day you were born. This is your ancient mind, your primal brain, the part of you that existed long before goals, ambitions, calendars, or careers. This is the mind that kept your ancestors alive when survival meant running from predators, finding food before starvation, and avoiding anything that felt dangerous or uncertain. This mind doesn't think, it reacts. It doesn't plan, it protects. And it has one single mission that overrides everything else. Keep you alive, keep you safe, keep you comfortable. The problem is that this mind cannot tell the difference between real danger and imagined danger. It cannot distinguish between a lion chasing you and a difficult conversation you need to have. It cannot separate genuine threat from temporary discomfort. To your ancient mind, fear is fear, pain is pain, and anything that feels hard, uncertain, or unfamiliar registers as a threat to your survival. This is why you feel genuine panic when you think about starting that business. This is why your heart races when you consider having that honest conversation. This is why your body floods with resistance when your alarm goes off at 5 in the morning. Your ancient mind is screaming at you. Danger, stay safe, don't move, don't change, don't risk anything. Your ancient mind evolved in a world where change usually meant death. A new environment meant unknown predators. A new situation meant unknown threats. Staying with what you knew, staying with what was familiar, staying with the tribe and the patterns that had kept you alive so far, that was the smart strategy. That was how your ancestors survived long enough to have children who eventually had you. But here's the brutal truth you need to understand. You are not living in that world anymore. You are not being chased by predators. You are not one bad decision away from starvation. You are not going to die if you wake up early, if you start that project, if you have that conversation, if you put yourself out there and risk rejection. You are not going to die. But your ancient mind doesn't know that. Your ancient mind is running software that was written for a world that no longer exists. It is trying to protect you from threats that aren't real. It is keeping you safe from dangers that don't exist. And in doing so, it is keeping you trapped in a life that is far beneath your potential. Think about what actually scares you. Not tigers, not starvation, not physical danger. What scares you is rejection, failure, judgment, looking stupid, being seen trying and not succeeding. These are not survival threats. Nobody has ever died from being rejected. Nobody has ever been killed by embarrassment. Nobody has ever been physically harmed by failure. And yet your body responds to these possibilities as if they were lethal. Your palms sweat, your heart pounds, your stomach churns, your mind races with worst-case scenarios. All because you're thinking about sending an email, making a phone call, or sharing an idea. Your ancient mind has hijacked your nervous system. It has convinced your body that social discomfort is the same as physical danger, and your body believes it completely. This is why knowing what to do is not enough. You can understand logically that there's nothing to fear. You can tell yourself rationally that rejection won't kill you. You can know with absolute certainty that you should take action. But your ancient mind doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of feeling. And feelings don't care about your rational arguments. Your ancient mind communicates through resistance. That heavy feeling when you think about doing hard things. That sudden tiredness when it's time to work on your goals. That inexplicable urge to check your phone, open the refrigerator, or do anything other than the thing you know you should be doing. That's not laziness. That's not weakness. That's your ancient mind doing exactly what it evolved to do, keeping you away from perceived danger, keeping you in the familiar, keeping you safe in a prison you've mistaken for comfort. And it's clever. Your ancient mind doesn't show up saying, "Don't do this because change is scary." That would be too obvious. Instead, it says, "You're tired. You need rest first." It says, "You should do more research before you begin." It says, "The timing isn't right. Maybe next month." It says, "You don't have everything figured out yet." It wraps its fear in reasonable excuses. It disguises its resistance as wisdom. And you believe it. Every single time. The ancient mind is also a master of short-term thinking. It cannot see next year. It cannot imagine next month. It can barely comprehend tomorrow. It lives entirely in this moment, and in this moment, comfort feels better than effort. In this moment, rest feels better than work. In this moment, distraction feels better than discipline. Your ancient mind will always choose what feels good now over what will be good later, because later doesn't exist to a brain wired for immediate survival. This is why you keep choosing the easy path, even when you know it leads nowhere. This is why you keep postponing the hard things, even when you know they're the only things that matter. This is why you keep trading your future for a more comfortable present. Your ancient mind is making decisions based on what feels safest in this exact second, with zero consideration for who you're becoming or where you'll end up. But here's what you must understand. Your ancient mind is not evil. It's not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to save your life using outdated information. It genuinely believes it's helping you. It genuinely thinks that by keeping you comfortable, by keeping you safe from rejection and failure and judgment, it's doing its job. It doesn't understand that the real danger is not in taking action. The real danger is in staying exactly where you are. The real threat to your survival in the modern world is not discomfort, it's stagnation. It's waking up at 50 and realizing you never built anything, never risked anything, never became anyone, because you spent your whole life listening to a mind that was afraid of everything. That's the danger your ancient brain cannot see. That's the threat it cannot comprehend, the threat of a wasted life. So what do you do with this ancient mind that lives inside you and fights against everything you want to become? You don't destroy it. You can't. It's part of you, and it always will be. But you can stop obeying it blindly. You can learn to recognize its voice, hear its warnings, and then choose not to follow them. You can thank it for trying to protect you, and then do the hard thing anyway. You are not your ancient mind. You are the awareness that can observe it. You are the consciousness that can recognize when it's speaking. You are the one who gets to decide whether to listen. And once you truly understand that, once you see clearly that the resistance you feel is just old programming running on autopilot, you can finally start making different choices. Your ancient mind kept your ancestors alive, but it will keep you small. It will keep you safe in a cage of your own making. It will protect you from everything except regret. It will save you from everything except the pain of never becoming who you were meant to be. The ancient mind has been winning because you didn't know you were fighting it. Now you know. Now you see it. And now you can finally start taking back control. Chapter 3. The Logic Lie. Here's where most people go wrong. They learn about the two minds. They understand the conflict. They recognize the ancient brain and its tricks. And then they make a fatal mistake. They think logic alone will save them. They think that if they just understand enough, if they just reason enough, if they just build the perfect argument for why they should change, the change will happen automatically. It won't. And believing it will is the logic lie. The logic lie is the belief that knowing better automatically leads to doing better. It's the assumption that if you can just explain to yourself clearly enough why you should take action, the action will follow naturally. It's the trap of thinking that your rational mind is in control simply because it can see the truth. This lie has cost more people their potential than ignorance ever has. Think about it. You already know everything you need to know. You know you should exercise. You've read the studies. You understand the benefits. You could probably give a lecture on the importance of physical fitness. And yet, you're not in shape. You know you shall save money. You understand compound interest. You've seen the charts showing what happens when you invest early. And yet, your savings account is empty. You know you should wake up early, work on your goals, stop wasting time on distractions. You know all of it. And yet, here you are. If logic was enough, you would already have everything you want. If understanding was sufficient, you would already be the person you know you should be. The fact that you're not is not evidence that you need more information. It's evidence that information is not the answer. The logic lie keeps you trapped in a cycle of endless learning and zero doing. It convinces you that the reason you haven't changed is because you haven't found the right framework yet, the right book, the right system, the right explanation that will finally make everything click. So you keep searching, you keep consuming, you keep learning about life instead of living it. And the logic lie smiles because it has you exactly where it wants you. Busy, informed, completely stuck. Your rational mind is powerful, but it is not in charge. It can see the destination clearly, but it does not control the vehicle. It can create the perfect plan, but it cannot force your body to execute that plan. Your rational mind is like a brilliant navigator, sitting in the passenger seat, reading maps, calculating routes, knowing exactly where you need to go. But your ancient mind is driving, and it's not listening to the navigator. You can argue with your ancient mind all day long. You can present facts, statistics, logical arguments, compelling evidence for why you should change. Your ancient mind doesn't care. It doesn't respond to logic because it doesn't speak logic. It speaks feeling. It speaks sensation. It speaks the immediate language of comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain. You cannot reason your way past a part of your brain that evolved before reason existed. This is why willpower fails. People think willpower is about being mentally tough enough to force yourself to do hard things. But willpower is really just your logical mind trying to overpower your emotional mind through sheer force of argument. And in a battle between logic and emotion, emotion wins almost every time. Not because emotion is smarter, but because emotion is deeper. Not because emotion is right, but because emotion doesn't need to be right. It just needs to be felt. You've experienced this countless times. You wake up motivated. Your logical mind has built a beautiful case for why today will be different. You have all the reasons lined up. You know exactly what you need to do. And then you feel the resistance. Time-heavy pull toward comfort. That whisper suggesting maybe just a few more minutes of rest. That sudden tiredness that appeared out of nowhere. Your logical mind fights back with arguments. Think about your goals. Remember why this matters. Don't give up now. But the resistance doesn't care about arguments. It just sits there, heavy and immovable, until your logical mind exhausts itself and surrenders. This is the daily defeat of millions of people. Not because they're weak, not because they don't understand, but because they're using the wrong weapon. They're fighting an emotional battle with logical ammunition. They're trying to think their way through a problem that cannot be thought through. The logic lie also makes you feel like a failure in a particularly cruel way. Because you understand so much, because you can see so clearly what you should do, you believe you should be able to do it. And when you can't, you don't blame the strategy, you blame yourself. You conclude that something must be fundamentally broken inside you. Why else would someone who knows so much accomplish so little? This shame spiral keeps you stuck even longer, because now you're not just fighting your ancient mind, you're fighting your own self-judgment. But here's the truth that will set you free. There's nothing wrong with you. Your inability to logic your way into action is not a personal failing. It's a design feature of the human brain. You are operating exactly as evolution built you to operate. The problem isn't you, the problem is your strategy. The problem is believing that the navigator can control the car just by reading the map more accurately. So if logic isn't the answer, what is? The answer is not to abandon logic entirely, but to stop expecting logic to do a job it cannot do. Your rational mind is essential for knowing what to do, but knowing is only half the battle, maybe less than half. The other half is building systems, habits, and environments that work with your ancient mind instead of constantly fighting against it. You need to stop trying to win arguments against yourself and start making action the path of least resistance. You need to stop relying on motivation and start relying on structure. You need to stop believing that understanding equals transformation and start accepting that transformation requires something logic alone cannot provide. The logic lie is seductive because it feels productive. Reading feels like progress. Learning feels like growth. Understanding feels like change. But feelings are not facts. Feeling like you're moving forward and actually moving forward are two completely different things. And right now you might be standing perfectly still while feeling like you're running a marathon. The most dangerous form of procrastination is productive procrastination. It's the kind where you're constantly busy, constantly learning, constantly improving your understanding, but never actually doing the thing that matters. You can spend years in this state. You can read 100 books, take 50 courses, watch 1,000 videos, and end up exactly where you started, because you were feeding your logical mind while starving your ability to act. Your logical mind will tell you that this chapter is wrong. It will say that of course understanding matters. It will argue that knowledge is power. It will resist the idea that it is not in control. That's fine. Let it argue. But notice that the argument itself proves the point. Your logical mind loves to think, to analyze, to debate. What it doesn't love is to be quiet while your body takes action, regardless of how it feels. Logic is not the lie. The lie is that logic is enough. The lie is that knowing equals doing. The lie is that your rational mind can simply override your emotional mind through better arguments. It can't. It never could. And until you accept this, you will remain trapped in the cycle of understanding everything and doing nothing. The way out is not through your thoughts. The way out is despite your thoughts. And that requires something far more powerful than logic. That requires learning to act before you feel ready, before you feel motivated, before you've thought your way to certainty. That requires making action the default rather than the exception. And that is what the rest of this book will teach you. Chapter 4. Feelings are not facts. This is the chapter that will change everything if you let it. This is the truth that separates people who spend their lives waiting to feel ready from people who actually build the lives they want. The truth is simple. Feelings are not facts. Your feelings are not telling you the truth about reality. They are telling you a story about reality. And most of the time, that story is wrong. You have been treating your feelings as if they were accurate reports from the front lines of life. As if when you feel afraid, there must be something to fear. As if when you feel unmotivated, the task must not be worth doing. As if when you feel tired, you must genuinely need rest. As if when you feel like you can't do something, you must actually be incapable. But feelings are not measurements. They are interpretations. And interpretations can be completely disconnected from what is actually true. Think about how often your feelings have lied to you. You felt like you couldn't make it through that difficult time. You did. You felt like you would never recover from that failure. You did. You felt like speaking up would destroy you. It didn't. You felt like that workout was impossible. It wasn't. You felt like that conversation would end the relationship. It didn't. Over and over, your feelings have made predictions that turned out to be completely false. And yet you keep trusting them as if they were prophecy. Your feelings don't have access to any information that you don't have. They're not drawing from some deeper wisdom. They're not connected to the universe's secrets. They're simply your ancient mind's interpretation of current circumstances, filtered through past experiences, coloured by fears and insecurities, and presented to you as absolute truth. But they are not absolute truth. They are guesses. And guesses can be wrong. Here's what your feelings are actually doing. They are scanning for threats based on old data. When you feel anxious about starting something new, that's not your intuition warning you about genuine danger. That's your ancient mind comparing this unfamiliar situation to its database of past experiences and saying, this is unknown, and unknown used to mean death, so we should feel terrible about this. But unknown doesn't mean death anymore. Unknown means growth. Unknown means possibility. Unknown means the only path to becoming someone different than who you've been. Your feelings are also lazy. They don't want you to do anything hard. They don't want you to expend energy unnecessarily. From a survival perspective, conserving energy was critical. Every calorie spent on something that wasn't immediately necessary for survival was a potential waste. So your feelings evolved to make you feel terrible about doing difficult things that don't have an immediate payoff. That's why it feels so hard to work on long-term goals. That's why exercise feels like punishment before you start and reward after you finish. Your feelings are optimized for immediate survival, not for building a meaningful life. When you feel like you can't do something, that feeling is not an accurate assessment of your capabilities. It's a protection mechanism designed to keep you from wasting energy on uncertain outcomes. When you feel like now isn't the right time, that's not wisdom speaking. That's resistance wrapped in the costume of patience. When you feel like you need to think about it more, that's not thoroughness. That's fear pretending to be preparation. The most successful people in the world are not people who feel motivated all the time. They are people who have learned to act regardless of how they feel. They have understood at a fundamental level that feelings are not commands. Feelings are suggestions, and suggestions can be ignored. You do not have to feel like doing something to do it. Read that again. You do not have to feel like doing something to do it. This single realization is worth more than every motivational video you've ever watched. Because motivation is just a feeling, and if you wait for the feeling of motivation before you take action, you will spend most of your life waiting. Think about all the things you do every day regardless of how you feel. You go to work even when you don't feel like it. You feed your children even when you're exhausted. You shower even when you'd rather stay in bed. You show up for commitments because you made them, not because you feel like honoring them. You already know how to do things without feeling like it. You do it constantly for obligations that feel non-negotiable. The problem is that you treat your own goals as negotiable. You treat your own dreams as optional. You give your feelings veto power over your future. When you don't feel like going to work, you don't stay home and reflect on why you feel that way. You don't do a deep analysis of your resistance. You don't wait until you feel passionate about spreadsheets. You just go. You act despite the feeling because you understand that the feeling is irrelevant to the requirement. Your goals deserve the same treatment. Your dreams deserve the same non-negotiable status. But you've been treating them like requests instead of requirements. The feeling of not wanting to do something will almost always show up before meaningful action. This is not a sign that you shouldn't take action. This is a sign that you're about to do something that matters. Resistance is not a stop sign. It's a signal. It tells you that growth is on the other side. It tells you that your ancient mind has identified this as unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory is exactly where you need to go. Chapter 5. The Resistance Voice. There is a voice inside your head that speaks to you every single day. It sounds exactly like you. It uses your vocabulary, your tone, your personal history against you. It knows every insecurity you have, every failure you've experienced, every doubt you've ever held. And it uses all of this to keep you exactly where you are. This is the resistance voice, and until you learn to recognize it, it will control your life while pretending to be your friend. The resistance voice doesn't announce itself as your enemy. It doesn't say, "I am here to stop you from reaching your potential." That would be too obvious. Instead, it sounds reasonable. It sounds caring. It sounds like it has your best interests at heart. It says you're tired. You should rest. It says you need to think about this more before you act. It says maybe this isn't the right time. It says, what if you fail and everyone sees? It wraps its sabotage in the language of wisdom and self-care. This is what makes the resistance voice so dangerous. You can't fight an enemy you don't recognize. And the resistance voice has been masquerading as your own thinking for so long that you can't tell the difference between a genuine thought and a manipulation designed to keep you small. You believe you're making rational decisions when really you're being controlled by fear, wearing the mask of logic. The resistance voice has a few favorite scripts that it uses on repeat. Learn them, memorize them, because once you recognize the patterns, you can stop falling for them. Script 1. You're not ready yet. This is the voice that tells you to prepare more, learn more, wait until you have complete certainty before taking action. It sounds responsible, it sounds prudent, but no one is ever ready. Readiness is not a destination you arrive at. It's a lie the resistance tells to keep you in permanent preparation mode. You will feel ready after you start, not before. Script 2. What will people think? This voice makes you terrified of judgment, of criticism, of being seen trying and failing. It makes the opinion of others feel more important than your own potential. But the people whose judgment you fear are not thinking about you. They're too busy worrying about their own lives. And even if they did judge you, their judgment cannot actually hurt you. It only feels like it can. Script 3. You've tried before and failed. This voice uses your history as evidence that your future is already written. It says, remember last time, and uses your past failures to predict future failure. But past failure does not equal future failure. It equals experience. Every successful person has a trail of failures behind them. The difference is, they didn't let the resistance voice use those failures as chains. Script 4. You don't have what it takes. This is the voice that attacks your identity, your capability, your fundamental worthiness to achieve what you want. It says, people like you don't do things like that. It says, you're not smart enough, not talented enough, not disciplined enough. But this voice has no evidence. It's not based on measurement. It's based on fear, and fear is not an accurate assessor of your potential. Script 5. Tomorrow will be better. This is procrastination disguised as planning. The voice suggests that future you will somehow be more motivated, more capable, more ready than present you. But tomorrow you will wake up with the same resistance voice in your head, playing the same scripts, making the same arguments. Tomorrow is not coming to save you. There is only today. There is only now. Once you know these scripts, you'll start hearing them everywhere. You'll hear them when you think about starting that project. You'll hear them when you consider having that conversation. You'll hear them when your alarm goes off in the morning. You'll hear them every single time you're about to do something that matters. Because the resistance voice is always loudest right before growth, the volume of resistance is directly proportional to the importance of the action. Small, meaningless tasks generate no resistance, but the things that will actually change your life, the things that will move you toward your potential, those generate massive resistance. This is counterintuitive, but it's true. The more resistance you feel, the more important the action probably is. Resistance is a compass pointing toward what matters. So how do you defeat the resistance voice? You don't defeat it by arguing with it. You've tried that. You've tried to reason with the voice, to talk yourself out of fear, to build logical cases for why you should take action. And the voice just adjusts its arguments. It finds new scripts. It matches your logic with emotional manipulation. You cannot outthink the resistance voice because it lives in a realm beyond thought. You defeat the resistance voice by acting before it finishes speaking. You defeat it with speed. You defeat it by moving your body before your mind has time to talk you out of it. The resistance voice needs time to build its case. It needs you to pause, to hesitate, to think. In that pause, it gains power. Cut the pause short. Act immediately. Move fast. This is why the 5-second rule works. When you have an impulse to act on a goal, you must move within 5 seconds, or your mind will kill the impulse. The resistance voice activates quickly, but it doesn't activate instantly. There's a brief window between the moment you know what you should do and the moment the voice starts telling you why you shouldn't. Act in that window. Move before the voice can speak. You must also stop negotiating with the resistance voice. You've been having conversations with it. It says you're tired, and you respond, "Maybe I can rest for just a few minutes." It says, "This is scary," and you respond, "Let me think about whether the fear is valid." Stop negotiating. The resistance voice is not a reasonable party seeking compromise. It is a saboteur seeking your surrender. You don't negotiate with saboteurs. You ignore them and move. The resistance voice will never go away completely. It is part of your ancient mind, and it will show up every single day for the rest of your life. But its power over you can be broken. Every time you act despite the voice, you weaken it. Every time you move forward while it screams at you to stop, you prove that it has no real authority. Every time you refuse to obey, you reclaim a piece of yourself that the voice had claimed. The resistance voice wants you to believe that its presence means something is wrong, that if you feel this much internal opposition, maybe you shouldn't proceed. But the opposite is true. The presence of resistance means you're moving towards something that matters. It means you're threatening the status quo. It means you're about to grow. Hear the voice, acknowledge its presence, and then do exactly what it doesn't want you to do. Chapter 6. Act before you feel. This is the chapter that contains the single most important skill you will ever learn. Everything else in this book builds to this. Everything after this depends on it. If you understand and apply nothing else, understand and apply this. Act before you feel ready. Move before you feel motivated. Begin before you feel certain. This is the master key that unlocks everything. Your entire life you've been operating on a flawed sequence. You believe that first you feel motivated, then you take action, then you get results. You believe that emotion comes first and action follows. You believe that you need to feel ready before you can begin. This sequence feels logical, it feels natural, and it is completely backwards. The real sequence is this. First you take action, then you feel motivated, then you get results. Action creates emotion. Movement creates momentum. Starting creates energy that wasn't there before you started. You don't wait for motivation to act. You act and motivation follows. Think about the last time you didn't feel like exercising, but you forced yourself to start anyway. What happened? Within 5 minutes, your energy shifted. Your mood changed. By the end, you felt accomplished, energized, glad you did it. The motivation you were waiting for showed up after you started, not before. This is not coincidental. This is how the human mind actually works. And it works this way every single time. The reason most people stay stuck is that they're waiting for an emotional green light that will never come. They're standing at the starting line, waiting to feel ready. But the feeling of readiness doesn't arrive before the race. It arrives during the race. It arrives because of the race. You will never feel ready before you begin. You will only feel ready after you've already begun. This is why waiting for motivation is a trap. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. Motivation is a result of action. You are not unmotivated because something is wrong with you. You are unmotivated because you haven't started. And you haven't started because you're waiting to feel motivated. It's a loop that feeds on itself. The only way to break the loop is to act without the feeling. Here's what happens when you act before you feel. First, you prove to yourself that feelings are not commands. Every time you move without motivation, you demonstrate that you are not controlled by your emotions. You build evidence that you can do hard things regardless of your internal state. This evidence accumulates. It becomes self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of all discipline. Second, you generate the energy you were waiting for. Action creates energy. Sitting still and waiting for energy depletes it. The tired feeling you have is often not physical exhaustion, it's mental stagnation. The cure is not rest, the cure is movement. Get up, start, do the first small step, and watch the energy appear as if from nowhere. Third, you build momentum. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. This isn't just physics, it's psychology. The hardest part of any task is starting. Once you're moving, continuing becomes easier. Once you've begun, you're past the highest point of resistance. But you only get past that point by acting before you feel like it. Fourth, you change your identity. Every time you act despite not feeling ready, you become someone who acts despite not feeling ready. You're not just completing a task, you're casting a vote for the kind of person you want to become. And identity is built through action, not through thought. You become disciplined by doing disciplined things before you feel like a disciplined person. The practice is simple, but not easy. When you know you should do something, start within seconds. Don't give yourself time to negotiate. Don't allow a gap between knowing and doing. The gap is where the resistance voice lives. The gap is where your ancient mind builds its case for comfort. Close the gap. Act immediately. This applies to everything. You don't feel like getting out of bed. Get out of bed anyway. You don't feel like making the call. Make the call anyway. You don't feel like writing. Write anyway. You don't feel like having the hard conversation. Have it anyway. The feelings are irrelevant. The action is what matters. You will notice that the resistance is strongest at the beginning. The moment before you start is the moment of maximum resistance. Your ancient mind throws everything it has at that moment. It makes you feel tired, anxious, uncertain, afraid. It screams at you to wait, to reconsider, to do it later. This is the moment that matters most. If you can push through this moment, if you can start despite the noise, the rest becomes manageable. Think of it like pushing a boulder. The boulder is heaviest when it's stationary. Getting it moving requires enormous force. But once it's rolling, maintaining momentum requires far less effort. Your actions work the same way. Starting is hard. Continuing is easier. So focus all your energy on starting. Don't worry about finishing. Don't worry about perfection. Just start. Just move. Just act. This principle applies especially to the things you've been avoiding, the project you've been postponing, the conversation you've been dreading, the change you've been putting off for months or years. These things have accumulated massive resistance precisely because you've been waiting to feel ready. Every day you wait, the resistance grows. Every day you postpone, the task seems more impossible. The only way to shrink the resistance is to act. Start today. Start now. Start before you finish reading this chapter. Here's a technique that will serve you for the rest of your life. Commit to just starting, not finishing, just starting. Tell yourself you'll work on the thing for just 5 minutes. Just open the document. Just put on the workout clothes. Just dial the first 3 numbers. This lowers the psychological barrier. Your ancient mind can accept 5 minutes. It can accept just starting. And once you've started, something remarkable happens. You usually continue. The momentum carries you forward. Most people overestimate how hard it will be to continue and underestimate how hard it is to start. They think the challenge is doing the entire workout. The real challenge is getting to the gym. They think the challenge is writing the entire book. The real challenge is opening the laptop. They think the challenge is having the full conversation. The real challenge is saying the first sentence. Win the start and you've won most of the battle. Acting before you feel ready will be uncomfortable. It will feel wrong. Your entire system will resist it. Good. This discomfort is the feeling of growth. This resistance is the feeling of breaking old patterns. The discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something different. And different is exactly what you need. You have spent years obeying your feelings. You have spent years waiting for emotional permission to act. You have spent years letting your internal state dictate your external behavior. And where has it gotten you? Exactly where you don't want to be. The approach doesn't work. It has never worked, and it will never work. The alternative is to become someone who acts regardless of feelings, someone who moves when movement is hard, someone who starts when starting is scary, someone who does the thing before the thing feels doable. This person is not superhuman. They simply understand something that most people never learn. They understand that action comes first. Everything else comes after. You don't find motivation and then act. You act and then find motivation. You don't build confidence and then take risks. You take risks and then build confidence. You don't feel ready and then begin. You begin and then feel ready. The sequence is reversed from everything you've believed. Act before you feel. This is not just advice. This is the entire game. Master this and you master yourself. Ignore this and you will spend another decade waiting for a feeling that never arrives, watching life pass while you stand at the starting line, forever ready to begin, but never beginning. Chapter 7. Identity over emotion. There is something more powerful than motivation, more reliable than willpower, more enduring than any feeling you will ever have. It is identity. Who you believe you are determines what you do far more than how you feel in any given moment. And until you understand this, you will keep trying to change your behavior while leaving the source of that behavior untouched. You don't just have habits, you have an identity that creates those habits. You don't just make choices, you make choices that align with who you believe yourself to be. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you think you are, and over time, those votes accumulate into a story you tell yourself about your own nature. This story runs your life. Right now you have a story. Maybe the story says you're someone who struggles with discipline. Maybe it says you're someone who starts things but doesn't finish them. Maybe it says you're someone who knows what to do but can't seem to do it. These stories feel like observations. They feel like neutral descriptions of reality. But they're not neutral. They're instructions, and you follow them perfectly. When your identity says, "I'm not a morning person," you don't wake up early. When your identity says, "I'm bad with money," you don't save. When your identity says, "I'm not disciplined," you don't stick to commitments. You're not failing because you lack knowledge or willpower. You're succeeding at being exactly who you believe you are. The problem is that who you believe you are is too small for who you could become. This is why emotion-based change never lasts. You get motivated on a Monday. You feel inspired after a video or a book or a conversation. You take action for a few days or maybe a few weeks, but eventually the emotion fades. And when it fades, you return to your default. Your default is your identity. Your default is the person you believe yourself to be when no one is watching and no motivation is present. Identity-based change works differently. Instead of trying to feel your way into new behavior, you decide who you want to be and then act accordingly, regardless of feeling. You don't say, "I want to exercise more." You say, "I am someone who exercises." You don't say, "I want to be more disciplined." You say, "I am a disciplined person." The language matters. The framing matters. Because your brain is always listening to how you describe yourself. When you identify as a certain type of person, actions become automatic. A person who identifies as a reader doesn't have to motivate themselves to read. Reading is just what they do. A person who identifies as an athlete doesn't negotiate with themselves about working out. Working out is just who they are. The behavior flows from the identity without requiring constant emotional fuel. So how do you change your identity? You change it the same way it was formed in the first place, through action, through accumulated evidence, through repeated votes for the person you want to become. Every time you act like a disciplined person, you cast a vote for being a disciplined person. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you cast a vote for being someone who follows through. The votes accumulate, the story changes, the identity shifts. This means you cannot wait until you feel like a different person to act like a different person. You must act like a different person first. You must cast the votes before the election is won. You must behave your way into a new identity rather than think your way into it. Here's the practical application. Decide who you want to become. Not what you want to achieve, but who you want to be. Not the goal, but the identity. Write it down if you need to. I am someone who keeps promises to themselves. I am someone who does hard things. I am someone who acts despite fear. I am someone who finishes what they start. Then ask yourself before every decision, what would that person do? Not what do I feel like doing? What would that person do? The person you want to become has already figured out the answer. Your job is to act as if you're already that person, even when you don't feel like it. This question becomes your compass. When the alarm goes off early, what would a disciplined person do? When the resistance voice speaks, what would a focused person do? When the task feels hard, what would someone who finishes things do? The answer is always clear. Your feelings will argue, but the answer remains clear. Act accordingly. Over time, something remarkable happens. The identity becomes real. What started as an act becomes authentic. What started as pretending becomes truth. You cast enough votes for the person you want to be, and eventually you become that person. Not through one dramatic transformation, but through countless small choices that accumulate into a new self. This is why emotion is unreliable, but identity is stable. Emotions change constantly. They fluctuate based on sleep, weather, circumstances, hormone levels, what you ate for lunch. You cannot build a life on something that changes hourly. But identity is persistent. Identity stays with you in the morning and at night, on good days and bad days, when you're motivated and when you're not. Stop trying to feel different. Start acting as if you already are different. Stop waiting for emotional transformation. Start creating identity transformation through behavior. Your feelings will catch up eventually. They always do. But they cannot lead. They are too unstable, too easily influenced, too disconnected from what actually matters. The two minds within you will still battle. The ancient mind will still resist. The resistance voice will still speak. But when you have a clear identity, when you know exactly who you are and what that person does, the battle becomes easier to win. You're not fighting for motivation. You're not fighting for energy. You're fighting for consistency with who you've decided to be. Chapter 8. The Silence of Execution. There is a final stage in the mastery of yourself that few people ever reach. It is not a stage of constant motivation. It is not a stage of endless energy. It is not a stage where taking action suddenly feels easy and resistance disappears forever. It is something far more powerful. It is silence. The silence of execution. The quiet discipline of doing what must be done without internal negotiation, without drama, without the endless noise of the two minds at war. Most people live their entire lives in noise. The noise of debating with themselves, the noise of questioning every decision, the noise of the resistance voice arguing and the logical mind defending and the ancient brain screaming and the whole internal world erupting into chaos every time something difficult needs to be done. This noise is exhausting. This noise is the real reason you feel drained at the end of days when you've accomplished nothing. The silence of execution is different. It is the state where action requires no conversation, where discipline requires no debate, where you simply do what needs to be done because it needs to be done, and the internal chatter has been silenced through repetition, through identity, through the accumulated practice of acting before you feel. This silence is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you practice, something you cultivate, something you return to again and again until it becomes your default state. And in this silence, you will find a peace that no motivation could ever provide. Think about the things you do every day without internal resistance: brushing your teeth, taking a shower, getting dressed. You don't have mental battles about these actions. You don't negotiate with yourself about whether you feel like brushing your teeth. You just do them. The silence is complete. The execution is automatic. This is where you are taking all of your important actions, to the place of silence, to the place where discipline is not a struggle, but a default, to the place where the question of whether you feel like it becomes completely irrelevant because the action happens regardless. The path to silence is not through force, it is through repetition. Every time you act despite resistance, you reduce the resistance's power. Every time you execute without negotiation, you train your brain that negotiation is not required. Every time you move forward in silence, you make silence more accessible the next time. The noise gets quieter, the debates get shorter, until eventually they disappear entirely for that specific action. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. One dramatic burst of motivation, followed by weeks of nothing, creates noise. Daily small actions, regardless of feeling, create silence. The person who does a little bit every single day will always defeat the person who does a lot occasionally. Because the daily person is building silence, the occasional person is reinforcing noise. In the silence of execution, there is no room for the resistance voice. The resistance voice needs time to speak. It needs a gap between knowing and doing. It needs you to pause and consider and reflect. When you eliminate the pause, you eliminate the voice. When you act immediately, automatically, silently, the voice has nothing to grab onto. It screams into a void where you used to be standing, but you've already moved. The silence also brings clarity. When you're not spending mental energy on internal debates, that energy becomes available for the work itself. When you're not exhausted from fighting yourself, you have strength for actual challenges. When your mind is quiet, you can hear what actually matters. You can see the path forward without the fog of your own resistance obscuring the view. This is the final integration of everything you've learned. The war inside you becomes a memory. The ancient mind still exists, but it no longer controls you. The resistance voice still whispers, but you no longer hear it. The logic lie no longer traps you, because you've stopped trying to think your way into action. Feelings still arise, but they pass through you without dictating your behavior. You have become someone who simply does. There is profound freedom in this silence. Freedom from the constant negotiation. Freedom from the exhausting debates. Freedom from the drama of being at war with yourself every single day. Most people don't realize how much energy they waste on internal conflict until the conflict ends. And when it ends, they discover reserves of strength they never knew they had. The silence of execution is also invisible to others. No one sees the battles you're no longer fighting. No one knows about the noise that used to consume you. They only see someone who consistently shows up, consistently delivers, consistently does what they say they will do. They call it discipline. They call it willpower. They call it remarkable. But you know the truth. It's not force, it's silence. It's the absence of the fight, not the winning of it. You have spent years fighting yourself, years negotiating, years in the noise of the two minds pulling in opposite directions. That era is ending. Not because you found a way to win every battle, but because you found a way to stop having battles altogether. This is the final transformation. From someone who struggles to do hard things, to someone who simply does them. From someone who needs motivation, to someone who needs nothing but the knowledge of what must be done. From someone at war with themselves, to someone at peace with the requirement of action. The silence is waiting for you. It exists on the other side of every action you take without negotiation. Every time you move without debating, you step closer to it. Every time you execute without drama, you touch it briefly. And eventually, through practice, through repetition, through the daily choice to act before you feel, the silence becomes your home. You will still have moments of noise. You will still have days when the old patterns try to return. But you will recognize them now. You will see them for what they are: echoes of an old war, ghosts of a conflict that no longer controls you. And you will return to silence. You will return to execution. You will return to the quiet discipline that has become your identity. The two minds will always exist, but only one needs to speak, and that one says nothing at all. It simply acts. You now know the truth that most people never discover. You have two minds living inside you. One sees the vision, one sabotages the mission. One knows exactly what you need to do. One fights to keep you exactly where you are. This war has been raging inside you for years, and for years you've been losing without even knowing you were fighting. But that ends now. You now understand that your ancient mind is not your enemy, but it cannot be your leader. You understand that logic alone will never save you because knowing is not doing. You understand that feelings are not facts, and they have no authority over your actions. You understand that the resistance voice will always speak, but you no longer have to obey. You have learned the master skill. Act before you feel. Move before you're ready. Begin before you're certain. This single principle will carry you further than every book you've ever read combined, because execution beats knowledge every single time. You have learned to build identity over emotion, to become someone who acts regardless of internal weather, to cast daily votes for the person you want to be, until that person becomes who you are. And you have glimpsed the final destination, the silence of execution, the place where discipline requires no debate, where action requires no negotiation, where you simply do what must be done because it must be done. So here is your challenge. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Within the next 24 hours, do one thing you've been avoiding. One thing the resistance voice has been protecting you from. One thing you've known you should do, but haven't done because you were waiting to feel ready. You will never feel ready, so stop waiting. The war inside you is over, not because the two minds have disappeared, but because you have finally chosen which one leads. Now close this book, and go do what you already know you need to do. The only question that remains is this: will you act, or will you keep knowing? The choice has always been yours. Make it now.